يعطيكم العافية. الله يحييكم جميعا في رياض قيكس. قطعنا عنكم فترة طويلة ونعتذر عن الانقطاع الذي إن شاء الله لن يتكرر. الله يعطي العافية الأخ محمد مجهز قائمة من المتحدثين الراعيين جدا الفترة الجاية، واللي بإذن الله تعالى ما نستغني بعد كذلك أنكم تقترحون أسماء تشوفونها مناسبة. مثل المحاور التقنية قاعدة تتغير بشكل مستمر، وهدفنا في رياض قيكس نساعد أو نكون منصة تبادل المعرفة وذكر التقنية المغطية. اليوم معنا ضيف جدا رائع الصراحة وجدا فاجأني، توم من بريطانيا، وهو المدير الإقليمي لشركة اسمها what3words أو W3W. what3words قصة عجيبة، ولهالسبب دعيت توم انه يتكلم عنها اليوم في رياض قيكس، لان كثير مننا قبل لا يبدا مشروعه غالبا يبداه اما بدراسه السوق او خلينا نقول يشوف وين الفرصه او يشوف بزنس موديل ناجح برا ويقوم تكراره خلينا نقول في دوله اخرى او في مكان اخر. اللي صار في what3words يمكن شيء مختلف ويمكن يتعرض له توم في خلال كلامه، اللي بدا اشخاص ما لهم بدا صدفه من واقع فرستريشن او خلينا نقول نتيجه خلينا نقول مشكله ومعاناه نتكلم عنها بعد شوي. في النهايه الحل هذا البسيط اللي يحلهم هم مشكلتهم اليوم قاعد يستخدم مو بس في دوله واحده ولا في مكان واحد، قاعد يستخدم في اكثر من دوله حول العالم. فكره بسيطه كنا نعتبرها فيتشر او كنت اشوفها زي غيري يمكن يوم مر عليهم البرودكاست اللي انتشر في الواتساب عن what3words، كانوا يعتقدون انها فيتشر. طلعت شركه فيها اكثر من 300 موظف اليوم متنوعين ومختلفين. فنبي نسمع اكثر عن الشركه وش تفاصيلها وكيف بدات واسرارها، واترك المجال لتوم يتكلم. الله يعطيك العافيه.
Should I take the mic?
Yep.
Okay. شكرا مازن. شكرا لكلكم. قبل أبدأ شوية معلومات عني. اسمي توم. أنا أشتغل مع what3words لسنتين هلا. بس وكل الشركة في يمكن 60 ناس، كلهم في لندن في بريطانيا، وهن في أنا واثنين وشخصين آخرين، ويمكن نسكن هنا ثلاث أسابيع كل شهر. هنا في رياض وقت بعض الأيام في جدة، بعض الأيام في دبي، والبقية في لندن. وقبل اشتغلت هنا مع what3words، وبالعربية هذا عنوان 3 كلمات. أوكي. قبل هذا كنت اشتغل في استثمار في لندن. كنت اشتغل في مجلس بريطاني British Council في لندن. وقبل هذا حاولت أدرس عربية في جامعة. وكنت في كامبريدج لسنتين، وبعد هذا كنت ساكن في مسقط في عمان. والمشكلة كان عندي كثير من الأساتذة من الأماكن مختلفة، مثل أستاذة مصرية، أستاذ أردني، أستاذ مغربي، وهل أحكي مع مزيج قلبي شوية من كل اللهجات المختلفة. ونسيت تقريبا كل شيء بالعربية هلا. So now I will switch to English to save you, sort of thing. I give up. You don't want to sit through all of this in Arabic. That would be very painful. So what3words, Mazen did a good job of explaining it at the beginning, but in short, I mean the simplest, shortest way to explain what we are and what we do is we're basically a global addressing system. And when I say addresses, I mean sort of, street addresses, house numbers, how do we refer to location? So the reason we exist, first and foremost, is because actually the majority of the world is very, very badly addressed. About 75% of countries lack what can be considered a reliable or consistent or adequate addressing system. And according to the United Nations, there are about 4 billion people around the world who just live quite simply without an address, completely off the map. I'm not sure how well you can see this image here, it's a bit bright, but this is a map of Jeddah, just a shot from Google Maps. A distinction I want to make, the world is not poorly mapped. So a lot of places have maps, a lot of the mapping imagery is very good, but what will happen when you click on maps in a lot of places, you will get this, which says unnamed road, and there are a bunch of coordinates. So it's referring to the places on the maps that is difficult. And another example from another part of Saudi of what it looks like for a normal map view, and then when you switch over to satellite view, you see there are a lot of people living there, and a lot of people who presumably want services and want an address and want to be able to talk about location. So what happens when we don't have an address? It's basically a combination of these things. On the left, you'll see the infamous WhatsApp pin, and every WhatsApp conversation I've ever been in Saudi has just a stream of WhatsApp pins and share current location sort of constantly. And this is a bit of a problem, and again, this is a bit small, but a lot of this relies on GPS accuracy a lot of the time. So what it says, just on that blue dot there, it says my location accurate to 65 meters. So that's when the GPS cannot get a fix on you. Maybe you're indoors, and everyone's experienced it, you share location, but all of a sudden the person turns up in the wrong place. So then how we accommodate for that often is basically with long sets of directions, sharing Google links, things like opposite Med Golf building, sort of descriptions rather than addresses. And then this is an example that's kind of more relevant or should be relevant to everybody here. So this is the invitation or the event for tonight's meetup, and here you can see the address. Sort of long set of information. Lots of there's a postcode in there. There's a town, city, country, and various street names. This is what happens when you try to open that in Google Maps. It just doesn't turn into a nice pin on the map where you're going. You can get this open in Apple Maps. It does a bit better. It sort of gets to where you're going, except for the fact that Badr is over here. So it's still not perfect, and that's because talking about these specific points is really difficult. Now, unfortunately, there's no sound tonight, but in this video, this is Mira Al-Haji. You'll be able to hear that. So basically the point I'm trying to illustrate there is when the addresses don't work, that's often what we fall back on, is phone calls and long sets of directions, reference points, second left, third right, that sort of thing. Now, of course, there is a way of talking about location that is universal and precise. The trouble is it's very, very difficult to communicate. In a perfect world, everybody would just say, let's meet for coffee at 25 degrees, 9 minutes, 40.918 seconds south. But it's not feasible. I can't even remember my own phone number, let alone a set of coordinates. And on top of that, if you make a mistake, if you swap around just one number, you could end up, unlikely on the other side of the world, you'd probably spot that, but you could very easily end up nearby, but not in quite the right place. And then, sort of, why does this matter? Is sort of the next question. And it actually matters more than you might think initially when you start to consider just how often, just how much we talk about location in our day-to-day lives. So everything from the obvious things, if you want friends to visit you at home, or if you want to get post or get pizza delivered, there you need an address. But then in a lot of the times you need addresses for a lot of sort of more fundamental things that we take for granted. So take, for example, you want to open a bank account or you want to start a business, buy an aeroplane ticket, any of those sorts of things, you need to be able to talk about where you are. And then there's the really important stuff. God forbid you get into some sort of emergency situation, you have to call an ambulance. Those things which are a bit annoying when you're looking for barded, they become really, really important when you're trying to get someone to just communicate to someone over the phone exactly where you are. So we basically wanted to create an easier way of talking about locations. We wanted addresses for everywhere. And the way we went about this was by basically dividing the world into these squares. So these squares are about 3 meters by, or exactly 3 meters by 3 meters. And we've given every single square a unique and fixed address made from 3 words from the dictionary, 3 random words. You can see it there in English, but also you can see it here in Arabic. And if my Arabic was good enough, I could read them out as they're going, but it's a bit quick for me. But it's the same concept. Three words from the dictionary that have no relation to the location, but a very easy way of talking about it. So these words, or rather we've built this address system to date in 14 different languages, and we're due to release another 15 or so in the new year. And this is so that it doesn't matter if you are an Arabic speaker in Peru or if you are a Mongolian speaker in Australia, you have a way of talking about location wherever you are. And what that does is it unlocks quite a lot of exciting things. It means you have a way of talking about places which were just never going to work on Google Maps before. And then in places which are on the map, but perhaps sometimes you need a bit more accuracy. If you're going to a big stadium and perhaps you want to get picked up or something dropped off or delivered, actually just knowing where the stadium isn't enough information. And then there are those, one of those sort of 4 billion people who are just completely off the map and need to talk about them where they are to get access to those quite often quite basic services. And then one of my favorites, just some of the best places in the world just don't have an address. Some of the best hidden places when you're traveling, when you're exploring, places which aren't going to have a formal address, but you really, really want to get to. This is now easier. So one of the key differentiators, I'm going to get a bit deeper into this than I normally do, because this is a geeks meetup, so I feel you deserve it. One of the things we do which stands us in contrast to traditional addressing or location reference systems is we are deliberately non-hierarchical. So with a coordinate or a postcode or a house number on a street, you have number 1 here, number 2, number 3, so on and so forth, which is logical. But when humans are using systems like that, it means that it's very easy to make a mistake. So I can say to you, my postcode in London is SW11 3NX. You could very easily write SW11 3NS. And that would seem like it was in the right sort of place, and it would be nearby, but it wouldn't be correct. And because we're human, there's no real way of picking up on those mistakes. But if we contrast that to the way we have built what3words, is we've taken those addresses that could potentially be confused and we've put them in very, very different places. So in the US, for example, I could say, let's meet downtown or at this park, on this park bench even, at table, chair, lamps. You could very easily mishear me, misremember what I say, sort of just mistype or misspell, and end up typing in table, chair, lamp. It would pick up on that mistake. So it would say table, chair, lamp is an address, but it's 10,000 kilometers away. Are you sure you didn't mean table, chair, lamps? Which again, if we think back to those examples earlier, if you're meeting a friend in the park is helpful, if you're in an emergency situation is critical. And here you can see another example in action. So I'm in the UK looking for Toffee Branch Pyramid. Type in Toffee Bramkid Pyramid or whatever that says, and it will say, oh, well, you're in the UK, this one's close by, I think that's what you mean. So you can still get there is the point. So so that's how, I mean, that's the system, but how do we actually access it? So we have our core application from which you can see screenshots here, and this is how a lot of people discover their 3-word address for the first time. It's the way you can use it to navigate to a 3-word address in whichever mapping application or routing application. You can use it to share a 3-word address over WhatsApp, email, text, whatever it is. But actually, the core of our business isn't really about just pushing our app. Our app is a great discovery tool, but the way we work is by taking our core technology and actually working with partners and integrating it into their systems. And we do that by one of two main ways. Alaikum salam. The first way is through an API. So a very, very simple API that allows anybody else's system to send us a 3-word address, and we will send back the coordinates. But then we also have an SDK. So SDK, slightly less common than API, stands for Software Development Kit. And what that enables us to do is sort of package up the what3words technology and put it on partners' own systems. And that means a couple of things. It means they don't rely on our system. So if we're working with governments or if we're working with big institutions, there's no third-party reliance. Enables the technology to work super, super fast, but most crucially, it enables it to work offline. And the reason we can do that is because the way what3words is designed, it's not a database, it's not a lookup table of addresses, but it's an algorithm. So by giving it 3 words, we're able to compute the coordinates and vice versa, as opposed to storing them all in a big lookup table or an Excel sheet. To give you an idea of why that's important, if we were to build a database of all of the 3-word addresses for all of the 3-meter squares in the world, of which there are 57 trillion, it would take about north of 20 terabytes of storage. So it's not going to sit on your iPhone. Whereas with the algorithm, we can package it up and compress it, and it means that you have all of the addresses for all of the squares in all of the languages, and it takes about 15 megabytes of storage. So you have it just sitting there, packaged up, working offline. I'm just going to take a drink. Speaking Arabic is quite hard on the throat. Okay, so like I said, what we do is we work with these partners, and currently we're working with something like just over 600 partners in about 170 countries around the world in all of those industries I mentioned before. So whether it's logistics, emergency services, travel, navigation, post, that sort of thing. And just to run you through a couple of examples, this first one is a project we did with the United Nations where they have a disaster reporting app. So what you can do, this is basically an openly available application that anyone can download, and people are encouraged to download it during a disaster or any sort of emergency situation. And what it will do is people can take a photograph of an incident, and the photograph without a data connection will be automatically stamped with the 3-word address, which you can just about see down here. And then that will be reported. So if you have someone trapped or collapsed building, collapsed bridge, people have an easy way of communicating that location onwards. So a nice or useful example you can think of is if you think of the floods in Jeddah last week, sort of very quickly, 15 minutes, everything really turns to carnage, and communicating location in those situations is very, very important. This sort of thing can really help that and simplify that. And then one of the other core sectors we work with is postal services. And postal services do the obvious. They deliver mail, but often they're at the front line between sort of government and citizen. So, for example, a lot in Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire, where we're working with the postal services, they not only provide posts, but they provide access to a lot of wider services. So whatever it is, voter registration forms, health registration forms, finance very often, getting people set up with bank cards and credit cards, that sort of thing. It's really as much of an access issue as it is a delivery issue. So we're now working with just shy of 10 postal services around the world, from Tonga to Nigeria being the largest country so far. And actually Mongolia, I just like to share this one because it's sort of is a big part of our story at what3words. Mongolia was the first country to adopt what3words as a national addressing system for the postal service. And you can imagine Mongolia, you have 4 million people living in a country the size of Western Europe. About sort of half the population is nomadic, and you don't really deliver postcards across that country. But what these guys have done very innovatively, they've started using our technology. They've equipped all of their postmen with smartphones so that you can give Mongolian postmen disposing splits congas, and they can find you in the middle of the Gobi Desert. Does anyone know what DuckDuckGo is? No, I should have hoped so. This is really one for the geeks. So DuckDuckGo is in the slightly unfortunate position of being sort of the world's 4th largest search engine, which means that nobody has ever heard of it. But they're massive. So they perform exactly the same function as sort of Google and Bing and the like, but they with zero tracking, so zero cookies. It doesn't take your location, that sort of thing. So it's very anonymized, and it's used a lot by developers. They have integrated what3words natively into their search fields. So you can just search for what3words index home raft, and that will take you to the front door of our office in North London. And to bring a bit more of a regional focus, we've working with Aramex. So Aramex, I imagine that every single person in this room at some point has had the phone call from the Aramex courier, sort of asking for location, asking if they're going to be in, asking to share your location over WhatsApp, that sort of thing. Another one for customers, it's annoying. For Aramex, and any other logistics company, it's really, really expensive process. Not knowing exactly where your couriers need to go takes up a lot of time and money. And then in another one of those key sectors is the travel industry. So again, I'm sure people have been in the situation where you get to a new country and you're looking up where to go, and you find the name of the cafe that you want to visit, or the viewpoint in the national park, or whatever it may be, and then actually getting there can be quite tricky. There's no way of really entering it into Google Maps, into your navigation device. We started working with the Lonely Planet, and again, it will be too small to see from here, but they're basically embedding 3-word addresses whenever you have those hard to describe and hard to find locations, to make sure that travelers can actually get to those spots. And they can get to those spots by putting it through any number of the applications, of the third-party navigation applications that have what3words integrated, that can organically accept a 3-word address. So this is TripGo, which is, anybody knows anything like Citymapper or Waze, it's not a similar application in European and Australian cities. And on the left is Navme, which is the world's largest sat-nav application. So it has offline maps, it uses our offline technology, and it has 25 million users navigating to and seeing 3-word addresses. Now this, I'm going to stop that. Can people hear that? Is it worth, because this is a 3-minute video, so I don't know if it's worth watching it, or shall I skip it and share it? Can people at the back hear the music? Yeah. Nothing? Skip? Not skip?
We can share it to the meetup.
I can try putting the microphone on there, or we can put it on.
Try.
Okay, well, let's see what happens. I don't know where to.
Hi, I'm John Caputo. I'm the Domino's Pizza franchisee here on the beautiful island of St. Martin in the Caribbean. Delivering to addresses on St. Martin is probably our hands-down single biggest challenge. Yes, you might have a house on lot number 2, but there are apartments in the back, there's something built around the side, downstairs there's something. And it's very difficult for us to go straight to that customer's door. But when we actually do get to the neighborhood, then it's 2 and 3 and 4 chances before you actually find the house that you're looking for to deliver the pizza. And that really does impact our speed of service.
When I call the customer tell me, I'm at the first gas station. So I drive, I say the first gas station I see, I'm gonna stop. So I stay there and I say, yes, I buy the first gas station. Okay, I'm coming. I say, I'm buying Best Buy. You're like, no, it's the other one up there. I went up there and I had 2 more delivery. Those 2 delivery take me about 2 hours.
When I moved to St. Martin 24 years ago, I drew one of the first actual maps that had street level on St. Martin. And that was what our drivers used to try to find houses. Even the ambulance would come by Domino's on occasion asking where a certain street was, and our drivers would help them. In the beginning, I've tried other things. I had little light beacons that I asked people to put on their front doors, so when they ordered a pizza, that a bright light would shine and our drivers would be able to drive straight to it. If the person didn't put it out, or if the person didn't have it, I don't want to say backfired, but it didn't work as planned. A lot of times it's very busy in the restaurant and the customer's saying, okay, I'm the second street on the right, I'm across from the mango trees, and now you have to be a botanist too to deliver pizza. But in a real world situation, when our driver's out there driving and maneuvering and rain is coming down on you and dogs are chasing you and all the challenges that our drivers, they're avoiding potholes and all kinds of fun stuff. Following directions is very tough. I heard a radio interview and it was talking about the what3words concept. You know, you take the world and you divide it into 57 trillion 3x3 meter squares. And each one of those squares has a unique 3-word identifier, or an address, if you will. This is fantastic. If you're sitting on a beach, at a beach chair, you have an address at that beach chair that our driver can actually go straight to. So we're going to have a big campaign to create awareness between radio and print and even cards from our drivers. Find your 3 words, give them to us, and your pizza is going to be delivered faster, fresher, and much more delicious.
I just come out my car and go straight to the door. Pam, pa, pa, pam, 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 pam. Customer look, ah, Domino's.
But why you guys didn't come up with this before? It would make things easier for me. I would never get lost.
Okay, so that I just wanted to show that because it's quite a fun video that both it kind of captures sort of the way we try to communicate what3words in quite a light-hearted style, the utility of it. Delivering pizzas is a really great example because I mean if you're buying shoes online and your shoes arrive 15 minutes late, you're quite happy you've got your shoes. If you're buying pizza and it's 15 minutes late, that's angry children around the dinner table. And the other thing about it is it's in the Caribbean and everyone just likes to see palm trees. So that's just sort of some of the big main examples of different types of organisations we work with around the world to help with the challenges of poor addresses. And like I said, there's several hundred organisations in almost 200 countries doing this, but what we've been doing recently as a company is really starting to focus in on specific markets, specific countries, and actually work to build an ecosystem of services and of awareness around what3words. So rather than just working with one service in one area, it actually means that a 3-word address can just work like a normal address wherever, whether you are ordering pizza or whether you are calling the ambulance or communicating with friends, getting a taxi, whatever it is, making sure all of that works. So the first country we did this in was Mongolia, of course, our favorite country at what3words. And we've now got another team in South Africa, and then a third team and a third bit of focus really here in Saudi Arabia. And we'll be doing this or sort of talking to people sort of quietly and gently for a little bit of time now, and we're starting to build sort of that key cohort of early adopters, people who really see this problem and really want to be part of the solution, really want to bring this to their customers. So from vanilla, sort of super well-known e-commerce fashion brand, to logistics providers in the middle, to the listing side, so people actually have 3-word addresses that they can type into their navigation apps. So for restaurant listings or destination KSA, we've been working with Avocado, who some of you may know. They deliver subscription fruit and veg boxes around Saudi Arabia. So really the full ecosystem. So here you can see just a sort of an early piece of work we did with Destination Riyadh around food trucks. So I'm sure everybody has noticed sort of the sudden sort of almost mania around food trucks in Riyadh and the number that are springing up. But one of the things about food trucks that's particular to food trucks is that they're never going to have a fixed address. They're on wheels. They're moving to wherever the people are, to wherever the business is. But these guys, a lot of these guys have social media accounts with tens of thousands of followers, and they want to let them know where they are. So we've been working with them, and again, it's a bit small here, but in Destination KSA, we were listing some of the top food trucks and giving their 3-word addresses for where they were going to be. You can see here we've got a set of signs, sort of magnetic signs that where the 3-word address can be written and then basically wiped off for the following day, depending on where they're going to be. And then from food trucks, which is sort of really right at one end, right to the other end, to sort of hotels like Kempinski, where they sort of want people to find them as easy as possible for a different reason. Hotels are often big complexes. There's often a very different entrance for the front door as opposed to the delivery driver coming around the back. So the front door to the Kempinski in Riyadh is ticking, moving, coherent. So these guys are already set up. So you can start to see sort of how 3-word addresses get out there into the ether, how we build awareness. And then once people know their 3-word address, once they've either discovered it with us through one of our partners or through one of those sorts of listing sites or magazines, what's important is that the services they use are enabled. So this is why we talk to the services and we talk to the companies and the businesses before we push to the public, really. So that's things like working here with Vanilla and Avocado to make sure that their checkout pages on their websites have a field that can accept a 3-word address. So when you're entering an address, you have line 1, line 2, and then you might have town and city and any other information. They're all separate fields. I think in Vanilla's case, we're integrated directly using the API. Avocado use Magento for their backend, so we have an extension for Magento, and we have plugins for all of the other big e-commerce sort of platforms and providers. And that means that all of a sudden, Vanilla and Avocado and the like, and some of those other examples I showed before, Kerf Meme, all of a sudden they can actually find their customers and deliver e-commerce the way it should be. Because really the way e-commerce is designed to work is to remove the hassle from shopping. And it really should be checkout basket to doorstep. That's really why it's invented. And in many places it is, but in the cases where you have poor addresses or it's difficult to talk about location, actually there are a lot of steps that fall in between that. So perhaps you make your order and Vanilla rings you up just to clarify that address information you put in, to make sure they can actually find you and they know which courier to give your parcel to. And then maybe the package gets over to Aramex, and they're a bit confused, so they call you up and they go through their address validation process. And then the courier just wants to double check, or maybe the courier calls you up and asks you to hang up, add you on WhatsApp, and then share your location. And then you get to the front door. So there's basically, there you can see a lot of those steps and contact points that are both bad user experiences and really costly inefficiencies for these companies that needn't exist were we able to talk about location easily. So that really is why. And the painful thing for the e-commerce guys, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It doesn't matter if it's the carrier's fault, the customer's fault, their fault, the weather's fault. It's the e-commerce guys who get the blame. The poor delivery experience is associated with them. And in one of the most, we're sort of really, e-commerce in Saudi Arabia at the moment is probably one of the most competitive markets on the planet. And there are two ways you can differentiate yourself on a product when you're selling the same thing. You can do it on price of the product itself, and then you can do it on delivery promise and delivery proposition. So that's why there is a focus on this. And then we've got a couple of other sort of bigger, wider launch partners coming up over the next 3 months. One of them is Shop and Ship, obviously powered by Aramex. Aramex are partners, clients on board already. They've got over 1 million customers in the region. They're going to be sort of telling their customers to provide 3-word addresses and in some cases even incentivizing them to do so. Easy Taxi, again, millions of customers within Saudi even. Very soon you will be able to use Easy Taxi, and for that destination, instead of giving directions, is just enter the 3 words. And then the third one is sort of mysterious black and white, is a yet to be announced pizza company. But no comment on that sly heckling. But yeah, pizza company in the region, you know, so hopefully you can get your slices hotter. And then, so that's just sort of a bit of general information, a bit around our focus in Saudi Arabia, but then I want to sort of bring this back out to the bigger picture of what we're actually doing. And I've titled this slide, this quite boring looking slide, The Future of HMI, okay? And HMI is a term that's used a lot in the auto industry, and it means human to machine interface. And what that basically means, it's the question of, or it's the challenge of, how do humans interact with their devices, with their navigation tools, with their smartphones, with their cars, with their smart fridges, whatever comes next. And this is where, I mean, for us, for what3words, it starts to get really quite interesting. Because there are a lot of services that are coming where being accurate about location is going to be even more important than it has been in the past. So that's why I titled this talk sort of an addressing solution for industries past and future, and this is really the future bit. So if you're, you know, even in central London, where you've arguably got one of the most, or relatively one of the most robust addressing systems in the world, your postcode is never going to be able to tell your delivery drone whether to land on your back garden or your front garden or on your roof terrace. These sorts of services need really, really accurate location. Similarly, with driverless cars, like this is really happening, autonomous cars. And when you're in an autonomous car, you can't really just tell it to sort of go slightly to the right or go around the back or turn left after the gas station. You need to tell it exactly where you want to go, right down to the doorstep. So this actually, next future technologies is they're building these pods which you may recognize as part of Dubai's sort of 2020 vision to get autonomous transport onto the road. We're already working with them to integrate what3words into their core tech. And then I alluded to it earlier, but there's the Internet of Things elements, where all of a sudden we're going to be interacting not just with our smartphones, not just with things that we can tap on and prod and that have nice and easy to use buttons, but things like our smart watches, things like our smart fridges, our smart homes, that sort of thing. And at this point, we lose that primary human to machine interface medium, which is sort of typing, you know, keyboards and mouses. And at this point, really, what we're moving towards is voice. So everything is becoming about voice. And the one thing that's really, really, really hard to do over voice traditionally is talk about location, because you have this dual challenge. You have the challenge of addresses just being inherently bad or just inherently not accurate enough, even in the best addressed places. And then you have the challenge of the input method. You have the challenge of voice in itself. Voice recognition is very difficult. especially when you start to have similar addresses. If you think back to what I was saying earlier about the non-hierarchical distribution, if you have similar addresses in similar places, machines really struggle to tell those apart when your input is voice. So this is a smartwatch company we've been working with, Blocks, where they are using voice technology to accept 3-word addresses, to both display it so you can know exactly where you are at that time, but also to input it as a destination for whichever third-party service. And then the next one, I'll try and get some sound going from this.
Where would you like to go?
Dwell, drag, fantastic.
The Uber to Dwell Drag Fantastic will be here in 5 minutes. Would you like to confirm the order?
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully you can start there to see why that suddenly becomes quite useful. So if you're being able to input a destination by voice with the precision of a front door, that's a demonstration of our internal, basically Uber voice app. That's where we start to be able to bridge we start to be able to cross that gap on the human to machine interface. All of a sudden, a human can talk to a machine, with the words that with the ease of words, which is how humans talk, but with the precision of coordinates, which is what these machines need. And that is, so you can see the flow again there. And it's that voice tech, which is the reason that earlier this year we partnered with Mercedes-Benz, who have come on board as a client, and as of early next year, you'll be able to get into, if you're in the position to buy a brand new Mercedes, which of course we all are, and you'll be able to get into Mercedes and you'll be able to use the voice technology and just say, navigate me to table, chair, lamp, whatever it is, and it will route you there. And I'm sure, again, a lot of people have had that experience with cars when you're trying to input the destination. Very often you don't bother, you just get out your smartphone, or you're twiddling around with the dial, trying to sort of select your postcode or manually type your address, or I've never even really bothered with the voice interface on cars. But yeah, so this is why we partner with Mercedes, and there should be another video here.
Navigate to what 3 words? Cool View Spark.
Okay, again, so hopefully that gives you an idea of sort of the bigger, or the wider sort of mission at play here, which isn't just to necessarily solve a single problem in a single isolated instant, but it really is a big part of this is being, and what we're doing is being sort of the future standard for the way we talk about location to our machines. And that's it. I think I've given you plenty of examples about people we're actually working with, and I thought I'd just finish up by giving you a bit of information about us as a company. I tried to explain in Arabic at the beginning, but you probably didn't understand me, that we're a company of 60 people working predominantly in London. We've got a small team in Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar. We've got a team in South Africa, a few people who spend most of their time on the West Coast in the States, and then 3 of us in Saudi Arabia. I should probably drop in now that we are very actively hiring for people in Saudi Arabia for sort of smart charismatic, better Arabic speakers, that sort of thing.
Can you talk about also the part-timers for the language revision?
Yes, so we don't do that in Arabic anymore.
But before?
So before, yes, actually, yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's something I forgot to include, is a bit of information on how we develop the languages. So you notice that there's 15 languages. Unfortunately, developing a language isn't as simple as taking an Excel sheet of a dictionary and feeding it through our algorithm. In order to build a new language, we have to get a list of anywhere between 25,000 and 40,000 words. And we have to make sure that that list of words doesn't include anything that basically doesn't include any words that you wouldn't want to be your front door. So it doesn't include basically none of the fun words. There are no fun words in what3words. It's just no rude words, no words that are culturally insensitive, which is very difficult when you're dealing with languages that often cover half the planet. No words which seem fine, but in certain contexts could be could potentially cause offense. We have to take out words. This is especially a big problem in languages like English and French, where you have a lot of words that sound the same but have completely different spellings. Obviously, that's a big problem for us because people are told their 3-word address, and if you're trying to type it in, it won't give you the right result. So we have to make sure that all of those words are removed so as there is no confusion. And it takes about 60, or a team of 60 sort of native speaking linguistic experts and students, about 3 months to build that list in every language we do. And we've done this for about 30 languages now. So I say the team is 60 people big. If you include all of the people who have worked to help us develop the languages, the company is actually about 1,300 people, I think, at last count. So that is a huge, actually a huge sort of, that's where a lot of our resource goes, into developing these new languages and making sure that it doesn't matter where you're from, what your mother tongue is, you can talk about where you are. And then I guess the question that I'm trying to answer here is, where do we get that resource from to do that? So far we've had two rounds of investment. The first one was led by Intel Capital up there on the top right. And the second round was led by Aramex. Aramex proper, not Wonder, but Aramex itself. We've had money in from Deutsche Bahn as well, so the German railways, but also the world's second largest logistics company, and a few others. So to date, we've raised just shy of about $20 million, which will keep us going for a while, but as I told you, it's a team of 1,300 people. So that's where we are funding-wise. And this is really just sort of one sentence that sums up our core mission at what3words and sort of why we're doing this and why we're driving this on. And it's these three things. It's to make the world really less frustrating, so that's for all of us day-to-day users, and we're more efficient. That's for the likes of Aramex and Deutsche Bahn and the people who pay us, and then really a safer place as well. Just making sure that when talking about location is critical, that people can easily and accurately do it. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Tom.
And of course, yeah, very happy to take questions.
We will have around 30 minutes of questions.
Perfect, whatever you like.
Anyone who has a lot of people have questions. Can I borrow your mic?
Yes, yeah, please.
So the name and the question.
You have a question, Mike.
Does this work?
Yeah, that's small.
Cool.
Yeah, hi Tom. To be quite honest, this is one of the most brilliant ideas that I have came across since quite a good time. It solved the core of the business problem as an individual or as businesses. I have maybe two questions for you. How what3words are doing in the US, which is like one of the I'll be very soon hands-on in e-commerce, and I'm amazed how I just heard about you from the Riyadh gig. So but how are you doing in the US when it comes to the, are you there yet? What's your obstacle? This is the first question. And second is if we have like hands on how the W3 working, if you send me like the 3 words, shows that shall I open it from the Google Maps, then go there? And if I'm living in the skyscraper, how does
Question. 3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So try to remember the first question about the US. I mean, so obviously whenever we release a new language in what3words, we release it for the whole world. So first of all, we exist everywhere. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about location in the middle of the sea or the Himalayas or in Kentucky. You can do it in whichever language we have live. The US as it has an imperfect addressing system, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably better than most. So it's pretty ordered. Every now and then you see horrible stories about it not being good enough for a certain emergency service provider or something like that, where people, where they've struggled to get help to people in time. But in the grand scheme of things, sort of explaining the problem to people in the US is a little bit trickier. It's not, they're not sharing WhatsApp pins to get around town. Having said that, there are a load of partners we work with. For example, the guys who organise all the logistics around the Super Bowl. So internally, when all of those sorts of places, kind of like there was that photo of the football stadium I showed earlier, when they have an incident in a big crowd, sort of police and first responders, they're using what3words in those situations. There's a sort of C2C and B2C courier company called Omnibag, and they're using what3words because actually for these guys it's just a case of time is money. Some users will put in their normal address, but they also accept a 3-word address, and if they do, and if they can encourage users to do that, then great, because then they actually find the front door. And so the US is not a sort of a key target market for us. Places like Saudi and South Africa, where you have this crossover between really high tech penetration, sort of people have very often at least 1, if not 9 smartphones. There's sort of really high tech literacy, and people are, e-commerce is booming, people are ordering food all of the time, but getting taxis, meeting friends, but having to deal with that challenge of poor addresses. So that's what makes markets like Saudi a more natural fit for us. And now, so then your third question was about height, and your second question was on?
Yeah, the third question, e-commerce. E-commerce?
On height as well, I think.
The others, how?
Oh, yeah, sorry, about opening it on Google Maps. Okay, yeah, so for example, it completely depends how you use it. So what our core technology does is it turns a 3-word address, word, into its corresponding coordinates, latitude and longitude. That's what our technology does. And once you have the latitude and longitude, you can use it wherever you use a pin. So from our application, you can open a 3-word address in Google Maps, in Citymapper, in Waze. You can also send that 3-word address to a third party. So you can either send it as word, or you can send it as a hyperlink. And either that will open in a browser on their phone, just like when you open Google Maps in a browser on your phone, and it will drop a pin. Or if they have what3words installed already, or if they have an application which uses it, it will either open what3words, or they can put it into that third-party application. And then the last question about height, which is actually a good one because it's a point that we're keen to stress, is that 3-word addresses aren't designed to be used in isolation. So they still need sort of periphery information. So in the UK, you'll have or whenever you have a postcode, you still need a house number, or you still need a flat number. It's very much the same with the 3-word address. So what people will give, they will say, flat 17, this part, flat 17, this building, Alaya, Riyadh, so on and so forth, because that's all needed very often if you have a manual sorting process. And then they will give the 3-word address, which is of the front door. And the 3-word address is the bit that they can communicate and the bit that actually gets the driver there. And the driver doesn't get lost between. So I used to work as So it was a part-time job when I was in university. I used to deliver pizzas. And basically, you don't get lost between sort of the front door and flat 17. You get lost trying to find the front door, sort of in those big complexes. So for logistics companies, that's not such a big issue. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is you just use it with other information.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I am Otman School and I'm working for a local bank in Saudi. Did you come across a business case? Did any bank in Saudi Arabia approach you?
So we've spoken to a couple of banks quite quietly so far, but working with banks is quite interesting from a couple of points of view. So there's really sort of two main, or arguably three main strands with banks where we work. The first is within the KYC, which means sort of know your customer. It's securities and regulation checks when, in order to check someone, check for fraudulent behavior, often the location is a key bit of information and it's often a blocker for a lot of financial institutions getting up. So a lot of guys, for example, if they're working with banks in the US or people who come from a banking sector in the US, they're constantly asked for addresses, and the simple answer is there isn't one in many cases. So there's a KYC element, and then there's also that access element. Sort of actually, once you have the KYC, that actually enables people to access financial services that they otherwise couldn't. So that's really the second strand and the second driver for our work with banks. And then the third one is just simply around the logistics side, because banks are one of the companies which, sort of unlike your utilities bill, it can't go entirely online. You still need to have your bank cards delivered, for example. So there's just the same logistics element, sort of the e-commerce side of it, where asking customers to provide their 3-word address as an easy way of actually receiving their bank cards. We were talking to a couple of banks in St. Martin in the past, which is where we did that project with Domino's. And they actually quite amusingly said that they thought we could solve the problem of basically tax evaders. So they had a lot of people who would purposely give bad addresses so that they couldn't get their taxes. We can't help with that. We can help when people want to get their bank cards. So for example, actually in Mongolia, with the largest bank in Mongolia, when you go to the ATM and get your money out, there's a reminder to use your 3-word address. When you get a credit card for the first time, there is, when you're writing out on that manual form, you can give the 3 Mongolian words, and they will deliver your credit card to that 3-word address.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi Tom, my name is Abdul Majdi. Thank you so much for this presentation. Really, I admired the idea. The idea is really wonderful.
Thank you.
And I think I would really use it. Yes, extremely use it. I think it's like it could be simply described as the DNS of the maps.
Yeah, that's a good perfect example.
I have 2 questions exactly. The first question is, are the translations relative to each other? I mean, for each square, do we have like 14 words to describe the same square? Because we have 14 languages for now?
Yeah, I can answer one at a time. So that's a good question. So the words are not direct translations. So for example, I don't know, test me now. If the address is no, because I won't know those in Arabic. So if the address is Beit Maktaba Malabis, it won't be house, library, clothes. What it will be is 3 completely random words. And there's 2 reasons for that. First of all is not all words just can be directly translated. In Spanish, if you're using verbs, it can be 1 word. If you want to say he went, that's 1 word. In English, that's 2 words. So you can't do a direct translation. And then the second thing, which is actually more of a feature rather than an accommodation, is the fact that the words seem random, but they're actually weighted. So we put the shorter, simpler words in places where there are lots of people that speak that language. So simple combination like table, chair, lamp will be in central London. and simple Arabic words. So basically, the only Arabic words that I know will be in Riyadh and Cairo and so places where there are lots of Arabic speakers. And then in the middle of Siberia, you might have the slightly longer words which are used less often, just to help make it more usable.
Great, thank you for the answer. The second question is, you've mentioned at first the 60 meters radius in WhatsApp, that sometimes we get the 60 meters radius, for example. And how does what3words handle the inaccuracy in GPS readings? Because you know the readings is in butterflies and unicorns all the time.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, it's a great point. So yeah, as you say, so often one of the challenges of using current location is that inherent GPS inaccuracy. It can take a while to get a fix, or sometimes if you're indoors, if most of us opened up our smartphones now, it would not give the GPS current location of exactly where we're sitting. It would think we're potentially over the road. So we can't improve GPS. GPS is however many satellites thrown up by the US government however many years ago. We can't improve that. We can't improve the fix. And even though we use GPS a lot as a guide, so for example, if I want to find the 3-word address of where I am, I will use a combination of current location to work out roughly where I am in the city, and then I will use actually use the map and the imagery to work out, okay, this is that street, I'm actually on the far side of the road. So if you remember what I said at the beginning about how actually the mapping data is very good, so most of the time with the combination of GPS and the mapping data, you can actually work out the exact corner and use it to find where you're going. And then that's sort of in a city context for cases where there just is no mapping data, or perhaps you're trekking or exploring or that sort of thing, or you're in an emergency situation out in the desert. In that case, actually GPS accuracy will normally be pretty good, basically, because there are no buildings obstructing the line of sight between your device and the satellite, so it's not so much of an issue. Does that answer it, sort of thing?
Thank you. Hi Tom, my name is Faisal. What's the business model?
I was waiting for that one. Basically, there's sort of the philosophy that underpins it all is sort of threefold for end consumers, 3-word addresses and what3words the application and the map site always has been and always will be free and openly available. We believe it's almost a right to be able to talk about where you are for all of those reasons we've gone through. And then there's the bit in the middle, which is sort of humanitarian organizations or NGOs. Basically businesses that are doing good, that need location, such as the United Nations or the Red Cross, who we work with. For them, we charge sort of a nominal fee, but it's effectively also cost-free. And then when we start integrating our technology into businesses who can potentially make or save a lot of money or dramatically sort of address their customers' frustrations, then we charge them a small fee basically every time they use a 3-word address. So put it this way, there's a good fact about UPS, where UPS, just the scale of that organization and with the number of deliveries they make, if each of their drivers were to drive 1 mile less per day, UPS as a company would save $50 million a year, just because of the scale they're operating at. And 1 mile per day is a 2-minute drive in a car, if that. And driving around the block because you went to the wrong door and it's a one-way system, that's a couple of miles. So what happens is when companies start to use what3words at high volume, so when they start to have lots of customers, give them 3-word addresses basically on their shipments for their address information, and when they want to know what all of those 3-word addresses actually mean, what the coordinates are and where they are on the map, that's when they need our technology, and we know when they're doing it at very sort of high volume. And if they're doing it at high volume, it means they're sort of either making or saving a lot of money, and that's when we charge them a fee. So based on volume, the more they use it, sort of the more we charge, but the overall cost per delivery sort of comes down. So we do that for logistics companies, for national governments or postal services. As I was saying, we've got 10 national postal services up and running. They actually pay a license or a biannual or a 5-yearly license for our SDK. So they take the technology and they install it on their computers, on their servers, on their systems. So they have no reliance on us. And yeah, they pay us a license fee. And then the likes of Mercedes, they have a sort of a model in the middle where, again, they pay a license fee, but they pay per car. So they pay a small fee per car. And yeah, for the production run of that car.
I have two very simple questions. The first is, how do you detect collisions in your 3words addresses? The second is, how do you protect your software, especially when it's embedded offline in the SDK?
So the first question was about collisions, did you say?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean similar addresses or addresses being the same?
I mean, there are billions of 3 by 3 meter squares, so maybe 2 squares have the same 3words address.
No, so the every square will have an entirely unique address, and so if you remember at the start, I was saying that there's 57 trillion squares, and we need 40,000 words to give every square a unique address, and you basically take 3 words, 40,000 by 40,000 by 40,000 is 64 trillion combinations of words. So you actually have a few left over. So it's enough to give every 3 meter square on the planet an address. So yeah, so that's how we avoid collisions, just by the fact that there aren't any. And as for, and it's a good point, on the, when we license our SDK, there is a sort of an added layer of security that we have to put in place, because unlike the API where we can just turn someone's account on and off with an API key, we have to basically encrypt it and box up that core algorithm to make sure that someone can't use it. Having said that, I'm sure that there are people cleverer than us in the world who could, if they put all of their effort into it, probably work out what was going on and how it worked. But people have done that with Microsoft software, and people have done that with people stream films online. But PwC doesn't steal its, doesn't take a hacked version of Microsoft Words for all of its employees' computers. And it's the same with us. So maybe, like I said, for end users, it's free anyway. And then for big companies, like Aramex, they're never going to use a hacked version or a leaked version of what3words. So obviously we don't want to be in that situation anyway, so we do whatever we can to encrypt it and make it as safe as possible, and we have license agreements in place with everyone we give that technology to. But ultimately, it is potentially, I'll probably be told off for saying this, but not necessarily the end of the world if someone was to work it out.
My question depends on the encryption algorithm. Not tell us.
No comment.
Yeah, but have you considered to buy names, to sell names? For example, the best visa.
Yeah, so a lot of people, it's a good question, it's something that we thought about, and a lot of people ask this, whether you can personalize the address, and I know you could have Tom's or Mohammed's big villa, okay? What that basically is there's a couple of reasons we don't do that. First is, the first one is it basically stops the core error detection working. So if you were to allow people to name their 3 words, I don't know, Riyadh's tastiest shawarma, all of a sudden you would have maybe Riyadh's tastiest shawarma and Riyadh tasty shawarmas and tasty Riyadh shawarmas, all in like sort of quite a similar place. And all of a sudden you make one small mistake and you can't actually work out, you can't see that error. So that stops it working when you're using it, using the app, but it also just completely shreds the voice recognition tech. That error detection is why the voice recognition just works. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is the offline functionality. As I said, it's an algorithm rather than a database. a database has to be constantly updated. So that's why you always need an internet connection if you want to search for a new address in a new place in Google Maps. You have to update your address so that they can, so that people can find you. We don't want to be in that situation when we're being used by emergency services. So the way to think of it is to basically forget what the words mean. The words mean nothing. In the same way that a GPS coordinate means nothing. It's just a reference. The point is that this is a communicable reference. Yeah, so that's it.
I'll give you some time to drink water and please have a seat. I would like to ask the participants of Riyadh, please. How many of you guys have what3 address app in the device? Raise your. You should all download it, ولا؟
Yeah, لازم.
يوم شفتوا البرزنتيشن, what was the most stunning, I would say, متى قلتوا واو في أي فقرة من فقرات العرض أو المرحلة من مراحل يهمني نسمع عشان لاحقا أي أحد يبغى يطور تطبيق يطور فكرة مشروع. متى كانت التكة؟
مرسيدس بنز.
ليه؟
لأنه بالبوكس.
Okay.
It's like Siri.
Yeah.
Siri, what is the weather today? It's like that.
هذا هو الشيء اللي خلاك ال HMI تفلسف كذا. جميل.
I think the moment that I imagine myself sending just the 3 words to the courier, to the pizza guy, and the same thing when it comes to the customer who's checking from my e-commerce platform, just sending the 3 words. This will be the hectic that because of sending like the location WhatsApp, calling back and forth. So cutting the time, cutting all the hassle. This is like I said, yeah, this is brilliant, yeah.
Good.
أحد عنده أي إضافة؟ وش التك تقنيا أو حتى في نفس الكونسبت اللي فعلا جابت راسك؟ وش كانت؟ تفضل.
To me, the wow moment was the Domino's video. You took something that's really unmappable and understandable, and it just goes up and down. I tried it several times myself, and you just made it easy peasy. I like that.
Good,
So
thank you.
That was my wow moment.
Good, I'm glad we made that work in that case. Thank you.
And if you allow me to ask you a question,
Please.
usually you mentioned that throughout the presentation, you always, whenever you open a market and increase the adoption, you work on the consumer side to get their adoption. Usually, if you have more experience in different countries, how long that takes, and usually how you growth hack users who are already in the mood of sharing bins on WhatsApp and Google Maps to change their traditional way of doing things. Because this has to do with unlearning stuff, then learning a new thing. So could you please let us know, because I know for a fact a lot of startup owners here are disrupting other industries, and they need to know how did you did it, guys, and how are you doing it, especially in launching new countries.
Yep.
Is there I would say, a process?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Just the first bit of your question on sort of how long it takes. Generally, sort of the really active part of a country launch, of a market entry campaign, will be about 3 months. And so that's what we've done in other places so far. And that will be where hopefully you'll be getting annoyed and bored of us, and we'll be in your face. But before that, naturally, there's a lot of work that goes into any country to build those partnerships. So we can explain the benefits pretty easily and pretty quickly. Most people that resonates with most people. But getting people's sort of big, complex internal systems set up, getting their staff trained, so that when the person taking the order for a pizza knows what you mean by banana toffee pyramid. That all of that takes time. But relatively speaking, that's the easy bit. The difficult bit is the bit that you alluded to, which is behavior change. In the same way that, or in not a dissimilar way, to how Uber and Kareem had to change the behavior of their customers to away from only getting into licensed or branded taxis to basically just getting in cars with total strangers. Similar story with Airbnb. Getting people, and there's a similar challenge for me, getting my grandmother to, not refer to her house by the landmark, but to use 3 words is going to be a challenge. And so the way we do that is there's 2 things. We basically keep it very, very focused and very, very small to begin with. For the first, and it may not seem that way actually from our presentation, because sort of we're working all over the world. And that's actually what we did for the first, and this is something that quite a lot of companies do. They will basically test their market by casting the net very wide and seeing where things basically pick up, see where people bite. It just so happens that we're a global addressing system, so our market was the entire world, so we ended up doing bits and pieces around the entire world. But these countries that we're focusing on now, that's where we saw by far and away the most organic use. So Saudi Arabia is really encouraging. We saw lots of engagement with the app, real sort of virality in people, telling their friends about it, sharing 3-word addresses, that sort of thing. So all organic. So we haven't today we haven't put any sort of paid campaigns into Saudi Arabia. So certainly we're at the point where we were deciding which market. We just saw the natural use. Aside from the integrations we have with businesses, there's nothing direct to consumer. And we're really a B2B2C company. We work with businesses to communicate the benefits to the consumers, because without the businesses, and oftentimes we're not very helpful. And so then, yes, we go from that really, really wide setup to focusing really, really narrow, and working very, very closely with the companies we work with. So all of those examples from Saudi Arabia and around the world, it's not just a case of giving them the technology and just letting them run with it. It's very, very hands-on. So, we've been working for 4 or 5 years on the best, most concise way to communicate 57 trillion 3 meter by 3 meter squares with 3 words in 14 different languages that turn into latitude and longitude. Like, it's not that straightforward. So we've been working on that a long time, and we use that with other companies, and we collaborate with them very closely to sort of build these campaigns and build this messaging. And then with those companies, we'll start on a very, very small area or city. Like with Domino's, you saw St. Martin. It's 25,000 people on a Caribbean island. It's very, very small. And then the final sweetener, which I think is basically essential in any market or any industry you're working in, is basically, it's basically customer acquisition, and it's incentivizing your customer to change their behavior that first time. I didn't take an Uber until a friend of mine gave me a voucher code that got me £10 for a free Uber. And then after that, I actually saw that that was a better and more convenient service. But you need that incentive, you need that elbow in the ribs to get you over that initial hurdle. So a combination of working very closely, very small, and a little bit of incentive. Sorry, any giveaways? You can all have the free app for free. You can all have.
That's a good giveaway. Actually, no one is allowed to go out without downloading that.
No, absolutely not. No way.
Regarding the wow factor, I think it's unlimited possibilities to use this app. One scenario, you can use location inside lakes or sea. For fishermen, for example, what's the best spot for fishing?
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, we see that. We also see a lot of people use it to list like dive spots or the best surf spots, swimming spots, that sort of thing. Places like saying earlier, like places that will never have an address, but you want to get to.
Regarding the revision of the language, you said you have 30 or 60 people revising what words to use or not. Do you perform it on each word individually or on the
No, so every single word before it's finalised and has gone into the live map has been seen by at least 10 people who have not only approved its sort of suitability, but they've also graded it in how sort of familiar that word is, and that enables us to put the common words in places where they're used a lot, in big cities where people speak the language, and put the stranger words in places where they're less likely to be used. So yeah, every single word.
I mean, when they revise it, do they see the 3 words together or the only one word?
So at the beginning, it's word by word. They see the one word, but then after, so before we finalise the map and put it live, we will have a beta map where we'll put all the words up, and there'll be a lot of testing of just throwing loads of users at that, just making sure it all feels right. Because it's a good point. There are always things which you can spot when they're in context. They had a slightly different meaning to what you were thinking in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, there were some quite amusing combinations, but yeah, nothing unpalatable.
Hi again. I believe we have several entrepreneurs here. So could you give us an idea, the plan of marketing 3 words to the public to use it, and how entrepreneurs get advantage of your plan for future?
Okay, so I guess there's.
Are there some couples?
There's basically there's basically 2 sides to it. First of all, with a lot of, I guess it depends on the partner. So with a lot of big organisations, big companies, it's actually still at a stage where it's more valuable for us to sort of leverage their brand. So at the end of the day, we don't necessarily need people on our platform. We need people using our addresses in third-party platforms. So we all work very closely with those companies to explain how their users can have an easier service using a 3-word address in their platform. If they never come to us, that's not necessarily a big problem. And then in terms of how entrepreneurs or sort of younger companies can benefit here, this is actually something that's a big focus for us, because we want to work with everyone. We want to build an ecosystem. We want addresses to work, 3-word addresses to work like normal addresses. We want them to work like WhatsApp pins, however people are communicating location. Saudi's really exciting in that sense, in that there are a lot of companies, sort of young companies, in the logistics and the e-commerce and the on-demand space. And we, kind of like this evening, just love to shout about them. Because they're sort of, we to an extent rely on these, they obviously benefit from using what3words, but it's a partnership. We get a lot out of it as well. And we like to be able to work with them and always point to them as solutions providers. Sometimes we'll be talking to an e-commerce company and they will say, this is all great, but my logistics guy doesn't know what's going on with 3-word addresses. And we say, oh, well, we know PIC, SLS, we know these guys, they're already up and running, sort of thing. So there's that element. And then also when people come on to our own platform, we're a great tool for people to discover their 3-word address for the first time, to find out the address for their front door. But after that, again, we just want them to use it in other people's services. So we say, okay, now that your address is table, chair, lamp, go stick it in Easy Taxi next time you're trying to get home. And we take people from our platform and we just push them and tell them about other platforms that are enabled.
Thank you very much, Tom. It was really helpful and really fruitful. And thank you all for coming. Please don't forget to subscribe to our meetup page to get updated about this, and also join our Telegram group to check out the video later on, and also to get all the great videos that Tom already posted. يعطيكم العافية وشكرا.
شكرا.